The following is part 1 of a Barefoot Lawyer Reports on China interview with Frances Hui, Policy and Advocacy Coordinator for the Committee for Freedom in Hong Kong Foundation.
Welcome to another edition of the Barefoot Lawyer Reports. I'm Bill Saunders. I'm the director of the Center for Human Rights at the Catholic University of America, where Chen Guangcheng is the distinguished fellow. Today, I'm speaking with Frances Hui, who I'll let her tell you about her story, but she is centrally involved in the fight for both democracy and religious freedom in Hong Kong. So welcome, Frances.
Thank you very much for having me. So my name is Frances, and I am currently the Policy and Advocacy Coordinator of the Committee for Freedom in Hong Kong Foundation. We are a 501c3 organization based in Washington and London that advocates for Hong Kong and to call for the release of political prisoners. I was born and raised in Hong Kong. I grew up in, a very free liberal and a Catholic environment, and I was born after the handover in 1997 and experienced a lot of the major social movements in Hong Kong. And I actually left Hong Kong in 2020 after the national security law was implemented, mainly because I was heavily involved in advocating for Hong Kong in international like the international stage, and it can can be seen as a crime under the law. And so I left Hong Kong in 2020 and sought for asylum in the US, and finally was granted asylum in the US in 2021. So I'm now just based in DC and continue to advocate for Hong Kong and the people, my friends who are currently jailed in Hong Kong, calling for their release and to continue to, fight for freedom and expose the truth of, the human rights abuses committed by CCP and so forth.
Yeah, of course, we're very involved in that, and Guangcheng has been very involved in it, and we spoke up for the freedom movement and the umbrella movement and everything. And it's sad what happened. Why don't you kind of tell us what's happened? I mean, there was some question by some people when they passed the national security law of what effect it would have. What effect has it had?
Oh, so the national security law was basically imposed by the Chinese government into Hong Kong, and is a very vague law that talk about safeguarding national security. But what the law actually does is to crack down on freedom of assembly, freedom of speech, and freedom of press. We have seen the movement happening. 2019, everyone was in the streets. I mean, this is something that Hong Kongers take pride of, is that we enjoy the privilege to be able to go onto the street and speak truth, and to protest against something, and to talk about different social issues and our opinions. But after the national security law was implemented, all of this is swept away. The civil society is demolished. People are scared to speak up, and because of the chilling effect it has created on the whole society, people are prone to self-censorship. And in the context of in the context of religion, priests, they are scared of like talking about the government in their sermons, and they can't include things like that in their religious education curricula. Many of the religious groups have disbanded after this law because they're scared of being targeted. And the reason behind it is because there are a number of very prominent activists are targeted. Some of them include persons of faith. And most of them are targeted for their advocacy for human rights and freedom, including Jimmy Lai, Cardinal Zen, and actually a Protestant pastor was sentenced to 13 months in jail for, under this law, simply for his work, his religious work. And so this is a law that, didn't really go through any process of, legislative process or like any consultation by the public. And it was pretty much imposed by the CCP to control and kind of restrict freedom of speech in Hong Kong after they have seen what happened in 2019 and 2020 with, the mass protest breaking out. And the impact of it is it's quite quite substantial to this point. Like we still have 1,700 people who are sitting in jail in Hong Kong, and they're all, political prisoners who are jailed simply for speaking out and fighting for freedom and human rights. Yeah.
Frances, I'm going to hold this up for anybody who's watching. I have this report, which I think just came out. I think I got a copy from you recently. January 2024's hostile takeover of the CCP in Hong Kong's religious communities. And this is an investigative report that you wrote for the Hong Kong Freedom Committee. And I think one of the things that's ominous about this report is it indicates that, based on what you have investigated, that it's just going to get worse in Hong Kong.
Yes.
Why don't you tell us some of the things that you talk about in this report about kind of what you think will happen or will be accelerated unless the world steps in and does something?
Yeah, so in the report, we talked about how religious freedom is being threatened under CCP's control. And we looked into four separate, areas of, or like four key trends of how, religious freedom is being threatened. First, with the Beijing's, their campaign of sinicization of religion. Second, the impact in education, how that is played out in religion, in education, and also sermons and religious activities and human rights advocacy, and also the direct attack on persons of faith and these organizations that religious organizations. When we talk about, so religious, sinicization of religion was first introduced by Xi Jinping in 2015, and it requires religious groups to align with communist doctrine, custom, and morality. And a lot of times it can be easily misinterpreted as enculturation, which is an idea that we will adapt a religion to an indigenous culture, to the culture, the local culture there. So we have like Our Lady of China, which speaks to the Chinese faithful. But then in reality, sinicization, it's more about anchoring CCP's ideology within the faith. So I think it's important for us to think, China as an atheist regime. The only reason that they are keeping religion around is because they want to use the influence of religious communities to basically propagate their political agenda. And in order to do that, they have to tighten control over religion, these religious groups, and to, basically transform these faith into a more acceptable version of doctrines that, and have the religious leaders and persons of faith to adopt them. And so we see that is happening in Hong Kong through education, through engagement with Chinese counterparts and infiltration. All of them are to influence theological discourse and neutralize the differences in values to advance their political goal. We all know that the church in Hong Kong has been kind of playing a role as like a bridge church between faithful in China and the Vatican and basically the international, community. And I think this role of being a bridge church is going to eventually be really restricted because of how the CCP is trying to take over the religious communities in Hong Kong to their side. And we see that now with the introduction of Article 23, which is a new national security bill that they're trying to pass in very near future. They are trying to really restrict what the freedom of people, and in particular they have they published the detail of the bill, and priests can be jailed for up to 14 years for basically refusing to disclose information in confessions. And specifically, if they know about any intents of treason and they refuse to share about it to authorities, they can be jailed for 14 years, up to 14 years. And it's a great threat to the church because it's something, the confidentiality of conversations we talk about in confessions are a strict rule for all the, priests, and I mean, in the Anglican Church, they also have the same rule that, priests cannot share any of the things that they learned about during confessions to other people. And we see that, being greatly threatened right now. And we know that Article 23 is absolutely going to pass, maybe this week or next week. And we hope that the international community can be more aware of this, is that we are really coming to the end point of a free a free religious environment in Hong Kong. And it's something that not a lot of people discussed in the past. I think we all have seen activists being arrested and jailed for their human rights advocacy, and we tend to disentangle it from religious freedom and thinking that people can still go to church, they can still practice their faith in Hong Kong. There are still mosques and churches in Hong Kong, meaning we must have religious freedom is still intact. But in fact, we found that throughout my research, I talked to many people who are basically, directly affected by the national security law. They range from, teachers teaching at school, teaching about religious education, and priests who serve in different roles in the church, and, people who participate in religious organizations. All of them have talked to me, and a lot of them talk to me anonymously because they're scared of the consequences. But all of them told me about how scared they are, how they're really worried about the future of the church in Hong Kong, and eventually, priests might have to, they might have to register with the Catholic Patriotic Association, and to take oath of fidelity to the government.
The Catholic University of America's Center for Human Rights has published a documentary on the United Nations Universal Declaration on Human Rights. The documentary features world-class human rights experts, from former State Department officials to ambassadors and human rights activists. It can be found on our website at catholic.edu/chr.